20th episode of The Window to Dubai.
Thanks for having me.
I'm here with Omar Shian from SellAnyHome.com. We're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about technology. I'm going to let you kind of jump in and tell everyone about SellAnyHome.com.
So SellAnyHome.com is the region's first and largest home buying service. So essentially, if you're a buyer, you come to our website, you enter basic details, and within seconds, we curate a ready seller with a property that fits your budget. And if you're a seller, it's the same thing, but reverse. So you come in, you give us basic information about your property. Within 10 seconds, we give you an estimated value of the property. And probably another 5 to 10 seconds after that, we'll let you know if it matches one of our existing buyers. So the main aim for SellAnyHome.com is to actually speed up and simplify the home selling or buying experience, depending on what end you are, creating real-time market coordination.
And you guys are actual real estate agency, right? Like you guys are...
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously on the backdrop of that, so we're a tech company first, but on the backdrop of that, we have agents that work with us that are RERA certified. Our license is that of a broker, et cetera, et cetera. So we're licensed fully to operate as a broker would. The main thing is we use technology to actually make sure to speed up the process and really try to match buyer and seller as fast as possible.
And you were telling me that most kind of real estate brokerage agencies, they're using third-party kind of places to get out. And that's what you guys kind of solved, is you kind of created your own platform that makes
Yeah, I mean, there's always merit in using third-party tools, et cetera, to actually, or different kind of methodologies, let's say, like in this case, here in this market it's not allowed, but in other markets they'll cold call, for instance. The only thing that really differentiates us, we're really trying to build, it's almost like a difference between a stockbroker and a stock exchange. We're trying to build a stock exchange.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we're trying to actually manage our tools in a way that we could actually scale based on a decision rather than, you can't just do a billion phone calls, or you can't do that. But if you have tools and you have softwares and you have strong algorithms, you could decide to have X amount of buyers, X amount of sellers come, and you could create that fully controlled environment of acquisition, which actually helps us scale and help us serve more and more customers in real time.
Yeah, and you were telling me actually that before SellAnyHomes, you were working with Microsoft.
Yeah, so I've had a corporate career, but predominantly, yeah.
Yeah, and now you were telling me a specific story about how when you were approving products that you were kind of trying to perfect them.
Yeah, so obviously, if I was to draw a big parallel, I do a lot of talks with multinationals around what entrepreneurship is like, because I've literally been there on both ends. And with Microsoft, I was fortunate enough to have a worldwide, a global role where I was one of the decision makers on one of their product categories. And as a decision maker within a corporate environment, you're sitting in a room, and between you and yourself, your aim is to actually, you feel like you're adding the most value by trying to perfect someone else's idea, trying to find, oh, you forgot about this, so you forgot about that. Whereas in corporate, it's the other way around. It's like, forget about this and forget about that, and don't overthink it. Just kind of keep it lean, because you have to, almost on the corporate side, you have to embed failure as part of your business model.
Yeah.
It's almost like someone in research industry or medical industry is testing. It's almost like it's an experiment. Startup is an experiment, right? By definition, you're driving an experiment, and by definition, failure is part of it. And then as you start kind of perfecting the model, you get to a point where it starts to work, and then you actually scale. If you're creating a vaccine, you don't just wake up, decide to create a vaccine, come up with a formula and do it. You test. Oh, that's good. Now mass produce.
Yeah.
Right. So that's essentially the main difference.
Yeah. And you were saying that your product guys now, are like the developers now, are kind of like in the reverse role, and you're pushing them to like, let's go.
Exactly. So it's human nature to always be self-preserving. So you don't want to do something when you're not ready or you're not proud of it, right?
Yeah.
Where it's counterintuitive to say, I get a lot of my advisory board asks me, so why don't we launch 2 weeks earlier, for instance? Usually my reasons are very individualistic reasons, like, because we're not doing this and we wouldn't be doing that. So what? The customer doesn't care about those. You do. Right? Yeah. You care to be, who was it, LinkedIn's co-founder, and that said, if you're proud of the first product you launch, you've launched too late.
Yeah, I love that.
So it's and actually something that we try to live by, and I literally have that in my office, but every now and then you fall in the same trap of wanting to perfect. Despite having that in my office, I'll start trying to perfect one, and then every now and then you need to kind of take a step back and say, wait a minute, I'm overthinking this. Just kind of 80% is good enough. Let's test it out, just like an experiment. You're not going to you're not going to create the vaccine on the first try, right?
Yeah.
So embed failure as a part of your business model, and you start inching closer to finding the final formula. At which point, it makes perfect sense to start spending money to invest, to grow it and to mass produce it.
And what do you think, where is sellandyhome.com going, or just in overall the global space of real estate? And
I think, overall, real estate is taking tech as part of its not just method of buying, but it's part of the business model. Technology is really shifting the business model of real estate as a whole. Think about 15 years ago, you bought a place and you had two options. You live in it or you rent it out.
Yeah.
Well, today, you have multiple options. Normal people would think that, okay, short-term rentals, a la Airbnb could be one. You're no longer renting out the whole place, you're renting out rooms in a place. Okay, well, add to that, massive space arbitrage that's happening besides Airbnb is you could rent out, if you have a fence on a highway in the US, that's actually not really a good location. Yeah. Now it could be, because you could actually put an ad on that fence and monetize it. Where weren't people doing that before? Because it's a headache to try to find the people, to try to find who's going to pay for the ad, et cetera, et cetera. Now there are platforms being created where supplier and supply and demand are basically meeting there, right? Add a step further, you could rent out your garage space if you live in a very, very busy area where parking is an issue. So this is just from a business model perspective. But then there's auxiliary businesses and industries that will absolutely turn real estate on its head. Imagine driverless cars in 15 years. What's that going to do to urban planning? You build a building now, you don't need 5 floors of parking. You actually don't need any parking because the cars could self-drive themselves out in the desert and park there overnight and come back. So it's high efficiency and just everything is completely, from a business model perspective, it's going crazy. And I think the next 10 years are going to be super exciting in this space. Of course, one of them is buying. Virtual reality, we could use AI and machine learning to know that you're 50 years old sitting in New York looking at an apartment in Dubai. I'll place the natural in the background as you're doing that. Basically emulating the emotions that you would have otherwise by walking around in the space physically, right? So there's a lot of these things that are easy to...
I can see VR being a big one for real estate.
Yeah, it's been there for a while, but I think it's leapfrogging all of that. Technology is bringing it to a space where it's... Real estate as a whole, as a business model, is bound to really just change, right? Before the stock exchange, people actually held on to company stocks for about, on average, 7 years. There's $54 trillion worth of investable residential real estate worldwide. And people hold on to real estate assets for an average of 8 years today because there isn't a stock exchange. Because liquidity has been a problem in real estate since Alexander the Great registered 300 BC, I think, his first transaction. I don't think he bought it, but since the first transaction, liquidity has always been a problem. If you want to sell your property, you cannot just decide to sell it like a stock on the stock market. Yeah. You have to put it on. You have to wait for people to come and see it. That's bound to really be shifted.
Wow. And you were mentioning VR, AI, and I think even blockchain. Where are you focused? What do you think is the next frontier?
For us, obviously, we're looking at the coordination aspect. We're looking at the buyer and seller, and we're looking at developing the real-time coordination. So we're looking at having the stock exchange for real estate. So my focus is to make sure that if you decide to sell a house, you could sell it as fast, eventually, of course, not today, but you could eventually sell it as fast as you would if you decided to sell a stock of a company's stock on a stock exchange, right? So that's ultimately our nirvana. And of course, if we're talking about blockchain, which enables essentially breaking down an asset and crowdsourcing. So you have multiple people owning a piece of the house. So your house, that will also enable you being able to sell your house seamlessly. You could today own a piece of massive buildings in Manhattan, whereas otherwise it would be either you're going to buy the building or you're not going to buy the building. Now you could buy a single small little percentage of that and actually take advantage of the returns of that building because it's rented out, et cetera, or capital appreciation. So tokenization of real estate is happening today. And obviously sitting on blockchain makes it a lot easier and a lot more transparent for people to trust it.
Wow. Sounds complex. I was like, oh, we went from a VR thing to blockchain. I don't know where we're at. I mean, I like technology, but listening to you talk, man, I gotta tell you, like, it sounds like there's just so much opportunity there. Yeah. It's almost hard to start, probably. I mean, yeah. I'm sure you've got it, but it sounds like there's just such a wide net. It's like, which one do you crack at first?
And I think part of having a startup is to decide which direction you're going. And if one isn't working or isn't working as well as should try something else and then try something else. We've pivoted a few times, and I think we're still preparing for other pivots to make sure that we nail the model that we feel is the perfect vaccine formula.
Yeah.
Right. And I think every startup should go through that same exact journey of start wide and then just test, and then scale. Don't throw the kitchen sink on one way or...
Yeah, I think it's hard because I think sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, you fall in love with a certain idea and not necessarily understanding that that idea was valid 3 months or 6 months ago when you thought, but the market could move, especially now with the technology you have.
Or your results, right? So you thought of an idea, theoretically it makes sense, you put it in practice and it didn't for X, Y, other variables, because the unknown unknowns as an entrepreneur are the biggest kind of challenge, right? So then the results are good. The key for an entrepreneur though is to make the decision based on enough data, right? So be satisfied with the amount of data that you have to have a conclusive decision that, okay, this way does not work or does not work optimally. Because sometimes you might try it once, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that, if you have a 3% success rate, you have to try it 100 times to finally admit that, okay, this is 3%. And then the other 100 times is roughly 3%. Okay, so I had a 3% success rate, right? Or a close rate or whatever.
And I think what you were saying earlier made a lot of sense is sometimes what you think the value of something is has no bearing on what the market thinks the value is.
Exactly.
So you could think you have a great idea.
Exactly.
It's all in line.
Yeah.
Get it. It's actually working, but it's just not as valuable
Absolutely.
as you thought it was.
Yeah.
And the market says, nope, it's only worth 1,000 instead of 10,000.
Same for assets, right? So if you can't decide what price you want to sell your stock at. You just say, I want to sell it, and then you have people giving you a price for it, right? Yeah. Same thing for real estate, right? At the end of the day, real-time market coordination will get you always the highest possible price that someone is willing to pay for it, right? Because if you have a big villa and you want to sell it at $1 million and it's actually worth $3 million, guess what? I'll jump in and say, hey, I'll pick it up for $1 million. Then he'll jump in and I'll say, I'll pick it up for 1.2. And then that's what real-time market coordination does. It's not really bidding, but it's essentially capturing the most value, because value is also contextual. You like blue tiles, I hate blue tiles, so I'm not going to pay a premium for blue tiles, but you would. Yeah. Right. So capturing all of that information, you could only do that when you create a platform that actually seamlessly translates it and allows for that coordination to happen in real time, or as much in real time as possible, so that you know for sure, hey, there's 100,000 people that could potentially buy my house. I'll accept the highest possible offer.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of what it sounds like you're kind of doing with sellanyhome.com, right? Exactly. This is kind of the idea behind what you're doing, is you're kind of creating that, not bidding war, but in a sense, you're creating that by qualifying the buyer and coordinating to the
buyers come here and they get pre-negotiated prices with us. So it's not like it's a ceiling-based pricing model. It's actually a floor-based pricing model. If we get an offer that's $1 dirham below that floor, we don't actually present it to the seller. Now, buyers really appreciate that because they come in and they see prices that really fit their budget. This isn't like, let's price in a buffer for negotiation. That doesn't exist. This is a price point that the seller is willing to accept. If you want to buy it, it's yours. And then there's 5 people that are interested in the same property, and it becomes almost like the one who will pay the most value is the one who will get the property that fits their budget.
Yeah. Let's just back up one second, because I want to go back to the whole Canadian connection, and then you coming to Dubai, because I kind of want to hear just how you kind of ended up in Dubai. You were obviously at Microsoft, and then you took that leap, and I kind of want to just hear that small journey of how you decided to go into the corporate world, because to me it sounds like, man, you're just like running down the road of entrepreneurship. But we were all you sound like you're in the corporate world, so I just want to hear that part, because I think people would love to hear that part of the journey too.
Absolutely. So the way I like to introduce my cultural background, obviously with the name like Omar and the way I sound, sometimes some people kind of look at me and say, where are you from? So my hardware is Lebanese and my software is Canadian. So I'm born in Lebanon.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the best way to, because obviously my formative years were happening in Canada.
Yeah.
I left Lebanon. I was 9 years old and lived all of my life until I came here in 2008. in Montreal specifically. So even more than just Canada, Montreal.
It's Canada.
Yeah, it's
Not the coast.
And so lived there, started my corporate career there. Had a business when I was 19, actually, for a couple of years. Did really well, and this was like, I don't want to date myself yet, but late 90s, early 2000. And then I remember my father asked me, hey, look, you need to learn how to have a boss. At the time, I was making good money. And so circumstances happened. It wasn't that I sold my business because of that, but circumstances happened that I had an opportunity to sell my share. And I went back to actually having a boss and worked in the corporate world for a while. And then in 2007, end of 2007, came here on vacation, absolutely fell in love with the place. And decided, you know what, this is where I want to make home. And had a few job interviews. At the time, 2007 was right before the 2008 crash, so it was actually still booming, actually. And started my corporate career here. Worked for a few multinational. Landed my last role was with Microsoft, where I was leading an organization for them worldwide, based out of Dubai. Again, it doesn't get better than that, because then it's quite central. Emirates pretty much flies you everywhere in one, almost in one trip. So this was a lot of fun, and it wasn't so much that I was fed up of corporate and wanted to jump into entrepreneurship. It was more that I really felt confident now in my set of tools and my exposure to say, first, actually not fear failure. So what's the worst that could happen? I have a good background, a good pedigree. I could earn money. That's okay. So let me really try it. So it really gave me that confidence of not fearing failure. I remember with Microsoft, they had actually contributed to my MBA, and I'm going in saying, I was on a path in corporate. I was growing in corporate. I was getting promoted. And I remember as soon as I finished my MBA, I felt ready to go off on my own, which is quite an oxymoron. But yeah, that's what happened. And so it was mostly readiness to not fear.
And what do you think is, because it sounds like you've done business in other countries. What is the difference, you think, for Dubai versus, say, Canada?
I mean, it's quite unique, right? Because you end up with such a beautiful melting pot of people with so many different experiences, and that's so enriching. Because you could, where Canada, of course, is a great place, very accepting place, where we're accepting of cultural differences. But people that are in Canada, for instance, have been in Canada for a long period of time. So they are culturally, for instance, Indian or Lebanese or whatever, but there's also Canadian. Whereas what I love about here is you meet someone from Italy straight out of Italy. They've been here for 3 weeks. I remember actually the first guy I met here, he literally had been in Dubai for like 4 days, straight out of Italy, straight, right? So you get to experience so many different cultures, and on the business side, so many different ways of doing business, almost in real time, because they were just there 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So it's incredible. And of course, it's very centrally located, so it's easy to do business. There's billions of people, a 2, 3, 4 hour flight. So I think holistically, as someone coming from a more of a homogeneous environment to an expat driven environment, an expat rich environment, it's highly enriching.
I think you just said every reason why I created the show. And it's funny because you were saying you should call it The Window to the World, because it's really like we're just interviewing people from all around the world. And it's so true. Like it's just, for me, it's just been such a unique experience that every day I meet someone from a different culture, different background. They like different food. They have different this. And it's like you just feel like you're just in the middle of the world. And it's such a unique experience. Absolutely. What do you think people have to do when they come here to be successful? Because I found it to be completely different than the United States. Even the way I interact with clients or the way I pitch, it's totally different. So I'm curious, as a tech startup, what do you think you would give advice to someone coming to Dubai as a tech startup?
I mean, I think some of it will be a little more generic than just Dubai specific. I think anytime you're trying to do something, you're trying to create something that solves a problem, you're on the right track. Right. So first, don't try to create something that's a cute to have or a good to have. Right. So you need to solve a problem, and that's true in any country in the world. Right. So that doesn't really change, and that's a very solid base. I think what differentiates the UAE as a whole is how accelerated that growth has been. right? So if you look at, everybody's seen the images of, let's say, Dubai in 1986 and Dubai in 2016, right? So everybody's seen those images, right?
You can see it just like 3 weeks ago.
Exactly. So when you see such a strong move and strong push forward, you take time to understand. I wrote an article before talking about, you know, the vision of the country and where they want to be in the next 2 years, 5 years, 50 years, or whatever. Take a hold of that vision and understand it, because this is all obviously going to be driving future policies, future investments, future opportunities. Like if you come in here, what's coming around the corner? 2020. So pay attention to what's happening around you. Exactly.
I'm here for 2020.
Yeah. So pay attention to what's happening around you, because things are moving really, really fast in a good way. And I think my partner penned this term, so I don't want to make it my own, but he called Dubai the ultimate startup. Right. Yeah. So where you know they learn and they grow and they learn and they grow, and the UAE as a whole is like this, right? So this is really important from anybody coming in is understand where this place is heading and how can you contribute to where it's heading. Yeah. And you're fairly kind of, you know, you could make your own luck by doing that, by understanding where it's heading and contributing to it. So what are the drivers that they want to drive in 2020, and how do you build a business around enabling such drivers? And you know that you're just basically you're riding the wave. Exactly.
You want to shout out how people can follow you, find you?
Yeah, so they can follow me on Instagram. I'm mostly active on Instagram, so it's at Oshihan, OCHIHANE. Whoever has Omar Shihan, please, I'll buy it off you.
Yeah. I know someone took William Gardner, and someone took William _ Gardner, so I have to be William _ Gardner.
But William Gardner, I mean Omar Shihan. William Gardner, you would think people in the world could, but Omar Shihan is just so it's OCHIHANE. Mostly active on Instagram. Now I uploaded my first 2 IGTV videos. So
nice. Yeah. Awesome. Great episode. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Yeah, thank you.